Spain didn't beat Argentina in the World Cup final. They destroyed them.
Pedro Porro, Williams, and thundering for Spain by Ferran Torres!
Spain, in the end, deservedly get the victory and defeat Argentina. 2 shots from Argentina, none in regular time. Both of those came in extra time.
2026, the champions of the world are Spain!
Let's go.
0 shots on target, not one, in 120 minutes, against the defending world champions, against Lionel Messi. That is not a scoreline, that is a statement. And by the time Ferran Torres buried the winner in the 106th minute, nobody watching was surprised. Because this is exactly what Spain had been doing to every team that stood in front of them for 6 straight weeks. This wasn't a lucky night. This wasn't one team having an off day. This was the final proof of something Spain had been building since the very first whistle of this tournament. A team so complete, so ruthless in its control, that by the end of it, the entire footballing world had to admit something nobody wanted to say out loud. Spain didn't just win the World Cup. They made everyone else look like they didn't belong on the same pitch. To understand how dominant this really was, you have to go back to the numbers. 1 goal conceded in the entire tournament. 8 matches, and only one team on the planet managed to get the ball past Spain's defense. Belgium, in the quarterfinal, and even that one came from almost nothing. Every other team that faced Spain walked away with a blank sheet next to their name. France, one of the most feared attacking sides in the world, didn't register a single shot on target in the semifinal. Argentina, the defending champions, couldn't manage one in the final either. 2 of the most dangerous teams on earth, back-to-back, held to nothing. That is not a defense that got lucky. That is a defense that made the best attackers alive look ordinary. And here's what makes it even harder to explain. Spain didn't win this tournament by parking the bus. They won it by attacking constantly, relentlessly, with fullbacks flying forward and wingers isolating defenders one-on-one, the kind of football that is supposed to leave you exposed. Every coach in the world will tell you the same thing. The more risks you take going forward, the more you leave open at the back. Spain broke that rule for 6 straight weeks and never got punished for it. So how does a team attack like that and still concede once in an entire World Cup? It starts with one player who barely shows up on a highlight reel, Rodri. The man in the middle of everything, the one who decided when Spain sped up and when they slowed down, the one who made sure that every time the ball was lost, someone in a red shirt was already standing exactly where the danger was about to come from. He didn't score the winning goals. He made sure the winning goals were the only thing that mattered, because nothing ever got past him first. Then there was Pedri, finding pockets of space that shouldn't have existed in a World Cup final, turning a stalled attack into a chance in a single touch. There was Lamine Yamal, 19 years old, terrorizing fullbacks like he'd been doing it for a decade, already a European champion and now a world champion before he can legally rent a car in most countries. And there was Pau Cubarsí, a teenager playing the biggest match in football like he'd been born for it, completing more passes in a World Cup final than defenders twice his age. This is the story of how Spain didn't just win a trophy, they ran through every single team that could have stopped them, and they did it without ever looking like they were in danger of losing. Rewind to the very first match of the tournament, and none of this looked inevitable. Spain opened against Cape Verde, a team playing in their first ever World Cup, and it should have been a formality. Instead, it finished 0-0. 74% possession, 27 shots, 7 on target, 11 corners, and nothing to show for it. The Cape Verde goalkeeper saved everything that came his way. Ferran Torres hit the crossbar. For 90 minutes, Spain dominated every single statistic except the one that actually matters. People started asking questions immediately. Beautiful football, sure, but could this team actually finish? 6 days later, they answered. Saudi Arabia were 3 goals down inside 24 minutes, Lamine Yamal scoring twice as Spain tore through them, 4-0 by the end. Uruguay were tougher, scrappier, and Spain ground out a 1-0 win off a defensive mistake, enough to top the group. Not every performance had to be a masterclass. Sometimes control was enough on its own. Then the knockouts started, and Spain found another gear entirely. Portugal pushed them all the way to the final minutes of the round of 16 before Mikel Merino, coming off the bench, found the winner deep into stoppage time. 4 days later, against Belgium in the quarterfinal, Spain's 6-match run without conceding finally ended. Belgium equalized after Fabian Ruiz's opener, and it didn't matter, because Merino did it again, coming off the bench to score the winner in the 88th minute. Same story, different name off the bench every time. That was the depth talking. But the match that actually changed how people talked about this Spain team was the semi-final against France. On paper, France were built to end Spain's run. Kylian Mbappe's pace, Ousmane Dembélé running at defenders full speed, a front line designed specifically to punish a team that pushes its fullbacks high and defends with an aggressive line. Every analyst before that game said the same thing. This is the matchup that finally exposes Spain. France finished the game without a single shot on target. Lamine Yamal, 1 day after turning 19, won a penalty that Mikel Oyarzabal converted. Pedro Porro, The fullback everyone assumed was the weak link in the entire team, scored the second goal himself. 2-0, and one of the most feared attacks in world football never even got close to testing Spain's goalkeeper. That result is the one that should scare every team studying this Spain side for the next tournament, because it proved the system doesn't break against pace, doesn't break against quality, doesn't break under pressure. Then came the final, and Argentina found out exactly what France had found out 4 days earlier. 90 minutes gone, scoreless, and the reigning world champions, with Lionel Messi still on the pitch, hadn't managed a single shot on target, not one. Deep into stoppage time, Enzo Fernandez picked up a second yellow card, and Argentina were down to 10 men heading into extra time. Even then, Spain didn't panic and force it. They stayed patient, kept circulating the ball the exact same way they had for 90 minutes, trusting that the opening would eventually come. It came in the 106th minute. Nico Williams rose at the far post and headed the ball back across goal, and Ferran Torres, a substitute, the same player who hit the crossbar against Cape Verde on matchday 1 and had waited the entire tournament for his moment, arrived and buried it first time. 1-0. World champions. Behind all of it sat a number that tells the whole story on its own. Unai Simón went 650 consecutive minutes at a World Cup without conceding a goal, breaking a record that had stood since 1990. One goal let in across the entire tournament, the meanest defensive record any World Cup winning side has ever produced. And they did it while attacking constantly, never once retreating into their own half to protect a lead. That is the story of this Spain team. Not a team that got hot at the right time. A team that solved a problem football has never solved before: how to attack without ever becoming vulnerable. Every champion team has a collection of good players. What made this one different was that its best players weren't even chasing the ball the way stars usually do. They were controlling it before it arrived. Start with Rodri. 2 years ago, this same player was on the ground in Manchester with a torn ACL, told it could be 8 months before he walked properly again, let alone played. He came back, then broke down again. By the time this World Cup started in June, nobody was certain the version of Rodri who won the Ballon d'Or even still existed. He answered that question in the only way that mattered. He led the tournament in completed passes. He was the reason Spain's high line never got exposed, because he was always the one standing in the exact spot a counterattack needed to pass through. He didn't sprint around making highlight reel tackles. He solved problems before they existed. And at the end of it, he lifted the trophy as the best player in the entire competition. Not the top scorer, not the most exciting name, the one who made every other name on that team possible. Then there was Pedri, 23 years old and already the closest thing football has to a player who slows down time. In the tightest spaces, in the biggest moments, when the entire pitch seemed to be closing in, Pedri would find a pocket the size of a phone box and turn defense into attack in a single touch. He wasn't at his sharpest for most of this tournament, and it barely mattered, because even a below-his-best Pedri controlled Spain's biggest knockout games better than almost anyone else on the planet could have on their best day. And then Lamine Yamal, 19 years old, a European champion at 16. A World Cup champion before he can legally rent a car in most countries on Earth. He spent this tournament doing what he's always done: isolating a fullback, driving straight at him, daring him to make a mistake, and defenders knew exactly what was coming and still couldn't stop it. He won the penalty that broke France open in the semifinal 1 day after turning 19. There is no historical comparison for what this kid has already done before most footballers have made their senior debut. Alongside him stood a 19-year-old center back who somehow looked like the calmest man on the pitch in a World Cup final. Pau Cubarsí completed more passes in that final than defenders twice his age have managed in an entire career. He and Rodri and the backline around them weren't just stopping attacks. They were dictating where the other team was allowed to run before the other team even knew it. This is what made Spain impossible to solve. Not one superstar carrying a team of passengers. A system where every single piece was replaceable and the whole thing still worked exactly the same. Take out Yamal. Nico Williams stretches the game just as wide. Take out Pedri. Fabian Ruiz slots in and still finds the pass. Need a moment of magic off the bench? Mikel Merino delivers it twice in one tournament. Need someone to finish the biggest chance of the entire competition? Ferran Torres, a player who had waited the entire World Cup for his moment, steps up in the 106th minute of a final and doesn't miss. 16 years after their first World Cup, Spain are champions again, and this time it doesn't look like an accident of one golden generation that will never repeat. Yamal is 19, Cubarsí is 19, Pedri is 23, Nico Williams is 24. Almost this entire squad will still be in its prime for the next World Cup, and the one after that is being hosted on Spanish soil. Argentina came into that final as world champions, carrying Lionel Messi and every ounce of experience a team can carry into a final. They left it without a single shot on target in 90 minutes. 0. Against Spain, that wasn't an unlucky night. It was the only outcome that was ever really available to them. Spain didn't just win a World Cup on that July night in New Jersey. They spent 6 weeks quietly proving that the oldest rule in football, that you cannot attack fearlessly without eventually paying for it at the back, was never actually true. They attacked constantly and conceded once. They pressed high against the fastest team on the planet and gave up nothing. They faced the best player of his generation in a World Cup final and let him leave with nothing to show for it. They didn't just beat Argentina. They didn't just beat France. They spent an entire tournament making the best teams in the world look like they didn't belong on the same pitch. And the most terrifying part for everyone else is simple. This Spain team isn't finished. This might only be the beginning.